Okay, Sergeant, would you start your recordings?
PC recording has started.
Recording through the cloud, all set. Sergeant Sadowski, you may begin with your opening statements.
Thank you, and good afternoon, and welcome to today's remote New York City Council hearing of the Committee on General Welfare. At this time, would all council members and council staff please turn on their video? To minimize disruption, please place electronic devices on vibrate or silent mode. If you wish to submit testimony, you may do so at testimony@council.nyc.gov. Once again, that is testimony@council.nyc.gov. Thank you, Chair. We are ready to begin.
Thank you, Sergeant. I will gavel in. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this hearing on the City Council's Committee on General Welfare. Today, the committee will conduct a hearing on a series of bills related to improving program operations and service delivery in the city's social services agencies. Today, we'll hear introductions that I am sponsoring, 1641, 1642, and 149, as well as Intro 1794, which is sponsored by Councilmember Ampry Samuel, and Intro 2081, which is sponsored by Councilmember Moya. As the city continues to resume in-person and on-site services following the pandemic, it is important that we do right by DSS clients who have long reported issues such as lengthy wait times, dropped calls, accessibility issues, and various difficulties accessing their benefits. Intro 1641 would improve efficiency at HRA centers located throughout the city by requiring all job centers and SNAP centers to always have an expediter on site when clients are being served or waiting to be served. Expediters would be tasked with checking in clients, performing a preliminary review of clients' documents to ensure clients have all necessary documents, and directing clients to the appropriate waiting line or waiting area. The bill would also require all HRA centers be equipped with digital displays and an audio amplifier. Intro 1642 would require the Mayor's Office of Operations to report on the exits from city administered facilities and the financings, starts, and completions of permanent housing for those exiting city administered facilities. Intro 149 would update reporting that is currently required on individuals utilizing emergency housing in the city to include a cover page with pertinent information from the report. The data from both of these bills will help ensure that those in shelter throughout the city are getting the assistance they need to move into permanent housing. Intro 1794, which is sponsored by Councilmember Alika Ampry Samuel, would require de-escalation and trauma-informed training for Department of Homeless Services employees. Intro 2081, sponsored by Councilmember Francisco Moya, would enhance the application for and the transparency of the one-shot deal program. These bills offer an opportunity to improve the client experience in benefits application and assistance by alleviating some of the hardships faced in navigating city services. The data reported from the two bills I am sponsoring will ensure that we can move more accurately and comprehensively address emergency housing utilization and move clients into permanent housing. I want to thank all the advocates and members of the public who are joining us today. I want to thank representatives from the administration for joining us, and I look forward to hearing from you on these critical issues. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge my colleagues who are here today. We are joined by, bear with me, Councilmember Barry Grudenchik, Councilmember Dharma Diaz, and we expect to be joined by additional colleagues as the hearing progresses. I would like to acknowledge my staff, Jonathan Boucher, my Chief of Staff, Elizabeth Adams, and Nicole Hunt, who are my co-legislative directors, and Vivek Srikumar as well, who works on legislation. I'd like to also acknowledge committee staff, Amanda Kilowan, Senior Counsel, Crystal Pond, Senior Policy Analyst, Natalie Omari, policy analyst, Frank Sarno, financial analyst, and Julia Haramis, financial analyst. I will also be reading on behalf of Councilmember Moya, who was unable to be here at this time when I read his opening statement regarding Intro 2081. On behalf of Councilmember Francisco Moya, I want to thank everybody. I wish everybody good afternoon. Facing eviction is a harsh reality for too many New Yorkers. And while the moratorium in New York State has been extended, through January. Through January of next year, we need housing protections at all levels to be in place. This includes a process that best serves New Yorkers facing housing hardships. We need to make it easier and possible for New Yorkers to receive assistance in the ways that best make sense for them, taking into consideration language preferences and access to technology. This means making sure that people are informed about the resources available in the spaces and platforms they frequent, that New Yorkers have support with the application process, and that there's follow through. We also need to understand the populations and the locations where there is need and what the follow through process looks like. The last thing New Yorkers need in facing hardships with a process when facing the last thing that New Yorkers need is facing hardship with a process when facing real life hardships. And we need to better understand how the process is working so we can evolve and iterate to better help New Yorkers. Thank you. To better help New Yorkers who are struggling. I want to thank the committee for supporting Intro 2081. Okay, and with that, I will turn it over to Committee Counsel Aminta Kilowan.
Thank you, Chair Levin. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aminta Kilowan, Senior Counsel to the Committee on General Welfare at the New York City Council. I am going to be moderating today's hearing and calling panelists to testify. I want to remind everyone that if you are not planning on testifying, we are requesting that you please watch the live stream on our website, www.council.nyc.gov. I'm going to be calling on everyone who is logged in here to testify. So again, if you are not planning on testifying, we're kindly requesting that you please watch the live stream as opposed to be joining us here. Before we begin, please remember that everyone is going to be on mute until I call on you to testify. After you're called on, you will be unmuted by a member of our staff. Please note that there's going to be a delay of just a few seconds before you are unmuted and we can hear you. For public testimony, I'm going to be calling up individuals in panels. Please listen for your name, and I'm periodically going to announce the next few panelists. Once I call your name, a member of our staff again will unmute you. The Sergeant at Arms will set a clock and give you the go ahead to begin your testimony. All public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes. After I call your name, please wait for the Sergeant at Arms to announce that you may begin before starting your testimony. And for today's hearing, the first panel will include a representative from the Department of Social Services, followed by council member questions, and then public testimony. I'm now going to call on Aaron Drinkwater, Deputy Commissioner of Intergovernmental and Legislative Affairs at DSS, to testify. And before doing so, I will administer the oath to the administration. Commissioner Drinkwater, do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before this committee and to respond honestly to council member questions?
I do.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Drinkwater. You may begin.
Thank you and good afternoon. I'd like to thank the General Welfare Committee and Chair Levin for the opportunity to testify on the several bills being heard today. My name is Aaron Drinkwater. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for Intergovernmental and Legislative Affairs at the Department of Social Services. The legislation being reviewed today presents several important ideas that we are carefully reviewing, several of which cover elements of program and reporting topics that are already in motion or already in the process of implementation. Our staff at the Human Resources Administration, HRA, and the Department of Homeless Services, DHS, work each day to improve the client experience of New Yorkers we serve. and we take our existing reporting responsibilities to the City Council and other stakeholders seriously. As we discuss these bills, we also want to stress the importance of considering the fiscal and staffing resources needed to maintain our current programs, including the many reforms we have made under this administration and the impact these bills would have on our existing operations and staffing. With these considerations, we look forward to working with the Council on several of the ideas being proposed today. Introduction 1641. Introduction 1641 intends to maximize efficiencies at HRA centers by proposing several staffing and management systems. The administration is currently reviewing the legislation and its impacts. As we review this bill, we want to highlight the critical work and reforms that HRA has taken to improve the client experience across our system. Following the passage of Local Law 169 of 2019, we worked closely with the Council to conduct a comprehensive audit focused on our operations and procedures at HRA job centers and Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program SNAP centers, with the goal of identifying efficiencies and improving the client experience at these centers. This audit, published in March of 2020, highlighted the many reforms HRA has put into place to improve center operations and how we have advanced our no wrong door services delivery approach, which focuses on breaking down benefit and service barriers for our most vulnerable New Yorkers. Additionally, HRA has been implementing an aggressive plan to modernize the way our programs and services are accessed. With the launch of Access HRA, we've opened up dozens of case-specific points of information online in real time for our clients, which expands access, increases flexibility, and opens up resources at our physical centers for those New Yorkers who are most in need of the individualized person-to-person attention. Our efforts to improve service delivery have also extended to our cash assistance program. Earlier this year, we worked with the state legislature to make permanent our COVID-19 waiver, allowing clients the option to have telephone interviews to apply and recertify for cash assistance without the need to go into one of our centers. This change now provides cash assistance clients with the same option that SNAP clients have had through our on-demand telephone interview system since 2016, giving them the option to apply and recertify for benefits without the need to travel to a center. Overall, these ongoing efforts have enhanced the client experience, and we look forward to working with the Council and bill sponsors to build upon this progress and ensure that modifications in the local law reflect the changes in operations and client access that have occurred following the audit required by Local Law 169 of 2019, and that will be implemented pursuant to the recent change in state law expanding cash assistance access. Introduction 1794. Introduction 1794 would require de-escalation and trauma-informed training for DHS employees and contracted providers. As reported in the client experience audit mentioned earlier, and as we've reported on previous anti-bias and trauma-informed service provision training is being rolled out for all 17,000 DSS, HRA, and DHS employees. The goal of these trainings is to improve staff professionalism and their response during challenging circumstances, all while being attentive to our clients' needs. Given this background and based on the preliminary analysis, we support the intention of this bill. We look forward to discussing the legislation and its implications with the Council. Introduction 2081. Introduction 2081 focuses on enhancing the application and transparency of the one-shot deal program, or the Emergency Rental Assistance Grant. Among several proposals, the bill focuses on promoting the program on the HRA website, updating the application process, and conducting outreach. HRA has already taken several of the steps mentioned in the legislation, including promoting the Emergency Rental Assistance Grant on our website and agency flyers, and advertising through various outreach channels. Moreover, through our info line, clients can call to receive information about the Emergency Rental Assistance Grant, oftentimes referred to as a one-shot deal, and other benefits for which they may apply. Throughout this administration, we have testified to our efforts and investments in increasing not only the payments of one-shot deals, but the amount paid to clients, reflecting the increased cost of rent and utility payments over time. For example, we have doubled the annual expenditure for rent arrears payments that were paid in 2013 through these efforts. We also understand that this bill was introduced a year ago before the federally funded, state-administered Emergency Rental Assistance Program, otherwise known as ERAP, went into effect. Given the federal rental resources available through ERAP and the changing landscape brought on by the pandemic, we look forward to discussing this legislation with the council to ensure New Yorkers have the most up-to-date information to assist them through these difficult times, and that we maximize access to federal assistance as opposed to assistance with a city tax levy cost. In considering the legislation, we also need to take into account the fact that eligibility criteria for cash assistance, one-shot deal rent arrears grants are set by the state and not by the city. Introductions 149 and 1642. Introduction 149 would update the report on utilization of and applications for multi-agency emergency housing assistance. The legislation would require the report under Local Law 37 of 2011 to be updated with a cover page listing the total number of individuals utilizing emergency housing in the city. While we understand the bill's intent, we look forward to working with the sponsor to ensure the reporting requirements of this bill are not duplicative of pre-existing requirements and reflect an accurate picture of clients in DHS shelter and other emergency shelters serving New Yorkers. Introduction 1642, a reporting bill focusing on exits from city administered facilities and the financing, starts, and completions of permanent housing for those exiting city administered facilities, present similar challenges as Introduction 149. We look forward to working with the council to ensure the reporting required is not duplicative of existing efforts and that the frequency of such new reporting requirements outlined in the bill are not burdensome to the agencies. Following the enactment of Local Law 37 of 2011, the Mayor's Office of Operations established a streamlined process to support compliance with requirements of this multi-agency reporting law. Each agency with reporting obligation separately collects relevant data from its program teams and compiles the data into tabular format. Each of the agencies then submits their data to both operations and the Department of Information Technology and Telecommunications, DOIT. On a monthly basis, operations combines the information provided by the agencies into a single PDF and posts it on operations website. DOIT separately posts agencies' tabular information to the New York City Open Data Portal in compliance with both this law and the city's open data law. Consistent with their distinct reporting obligations under Local Law 37, each agency maintains a spreadsheet containing the data set it collects and reports, which also contains information directing the reader to other relevant agencies' data sets for ease of navigation and transparency. After nearly 10 years of data reporting, operations and the agencies are comfortable with this process. The additional requirements set forth in Intro 1642 will not be burdensome to operations, which will continue to receive data from the agencies on a monthly basis and post it to the operations websites. The agencies will also continue to submit data to DOIT for posting on the Open Data Portal. Operations will continue to monitor this process to see that relevant data is posted in both places in a timely manner. It is important to note, however, that the introduction sets forth new reporting requirements for the agencies. We look forward to understand which data are available and the impact these requirements have on the agencies. We appreciate the opportunity to testify today and look forward to discussing these bills and how they impact our agencies. Thank you, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Drinkwater. Before I turn to Chair Levin for questions, I'd like to remind council members to use the raise hand function in Zoom to indicate that you have a question for the administration in this panel. And please remember to keep your questions and your answers to 5 minutes. And I'm now going to turn it back over to Chair Levin.
Thank you very much, Councilor Kilowan. So I just wanted to make sure that we have clarity on the administration's position. So I'll go bill by bill, if that's okay. So for 1641, is the administration then supportive of the legislation?
So as I had mentioned in the testimony, sorry, 1641 or 1642?
41.
Sorry. So there are elements contained within the bill that the agency is already doing. For example, We currently have done significant work in regards to some of the legislation passed on client experience, our no wrong door service approach, as well as changes that have been made through the modernization of our the way our programs and services are accessed through Access HRA. The change that we were able to advocate for and then work with the state legislature to pass and make permanent our COVID-19 waiver to allow clients to apply for and recertify for cash assistance using telephones is critically important, and will change, in a similar way, the way that our job centers transact with clients that we've seen in our SNAP centers. And we have also done significant work in terms of addressing issues of wait time at our centers. We continue to monitor and report on those wait times, and looking at when clients are utilizing Access HRA as opposed to coming into the centers. We know that it can alleviate some of the requirements on staff in the center to ensure that those clients who most need person-to-person interaction are able to gain that in the center. The requirement under the local law of having an expediter, we have advised the council on our work of a bill that was passed under their client experience package, sponsored by the speaker in regards to placing social workers in job and SNAP centers. That work had been delayed because of the pandemic, but requires the agency to produce a pilot report based on that. And I think that's going to give us some important information in terms of how better we can assist clients who are coming into the center and expedite they're transacting with the agency as they come into the centers.
So, part of this is that, there is before COVID and then there will be after COVID. And so, we have to kind of go on the assumption that the emergency authorization for recertifications is to be done remotely will one day expire, and unless somebody's saying they're going to be permanent. Is anyone?
That's
saying
correct.
that?
We worked with the state legislature who passed legislation to make those changes permanent, so that way individuals who are applying for cash and recertifying cash are able to do so outside of centers.
And that was passed by the legislature.
That's correct.
Okay, and that's
We can share that bill
entirely.
with you.
That's entirely up to the legislature. In other words, that's a state decision, federal requirements don't require certain in-person.
That's correct. That's correct.
interactions.
That's a decision that can be made at the state level. There are states across the country who have already authorized this for many years. It's something that we've been advocating to the state for a number of years, and we're pleased that they took action and the legislature passed that this year.
So then can you speak a little bit to how then you anticipate the long-term, what has that done then for job centers and SNAP centers in the area system?
Yeah, so we can speak to what we've seen as a result in regard to the change on the SNAP side, where we've seen significant decrease in foot traffic at our SNAP centers. With the availability for clients to utilize Access HRA and conduct their interviews over the phone, we saw a dramatic decrease in foot traffic at our SNAP centers. That channel shift is what facilitated that. We can only expect that
Can you give a percentage decrease?
It was, I believe, more than 90%. That data is all included in the audit as required under local law 169, and it's posted on our website, but I can get you that exact number.
So are there currently any lines then at HRA centers of any kind?
Are there lines?
I mean,
we continue to have wait times at our center. I haven't checked the latest monthly report. As we've communicated weekly throughout the course of the pandemic, there were HRA job and SNAP centers that maintained their operating hours throughout the course of the pandemic, allowing clients to come in person to transact with the agency. They did not have to go to their home centers because many home centers were closed down. We maintained 7 open facilities throughout the course of the pandemic. 2 in Brooklyn, 2 in the Bronx, and 1 in every other borough. We are now slowly opening our centers back up. We maintain the open locations on our website and continue to utilize the weekly letter that we send out following the commissioner's call each week to update on the reopening of centers as that reopening takes place. So we do continue to monitor and look at wait times and have seen, I think it's hard to look at the wait time data currently because of the ways in which we adjusted our service delivery to respond to the pandemic. So again, because there were only
how do you expect then service delivery to change as we come out of the pandemic? Are there going to be changes from right now, the current status quo, to post-COVID?
So I think that's all information, or that's a question that we continue to look at. One, we're focused on reopening the centers safely for clients needing to come into the centers and our staff who are reporting to the centers for work. But as I mentioned, the change that we saw with SNAP was a pretty dramatic change in terms of individuals who were coming into the centers because SNAP clients were able to conduct their business with the agency outside of the centers. So we saw a dramatic decrease in foot traffic in our SNAP centers, but we recognize the importance of maintaining physical locations to ensure that clients who did not feel comfortable utilizing Access HRA or just felt comfortable, transacting with the agency in person, that option remained available.
Does HRA have digital displays and audio amplifiers in the HRA centers to be able to facilitate people knowing when their times are and so on and so forth?
So the layout of centers varies depending on the center and what services might be co-located there. So, we have job and SNAP centers that are co-located, we have Medicaid offices that are co-located, and as a result, we have different client services areas. We do utilize a ticket calling system that does include a digital display in client services areas. But in terms of the requirements set forth in the provision about amplification systems, we want to be thoughtful about what those mean in terms of, if it's creating confusion as written. For example, it states that the amplified system needs to, transmit the announcement throughout every area of the center. If I'm waiting for my SNAP ticket to be called, and that information is being broadcast in, the Medicaid customer service area, that could create confusion for clients. So I think we want to be thoughtful about what's required.
I suppose I was at the DMV yesterday, and they have like a lot of different ticket windows. So they'll be like, now calling L7549 at window 19. And then it'll be like, that's for one type of thing,
Right.
That window does enforcement, and then the other window does some other thing. It's a digital display with an amplified announcement, and it's fairly easy to navigate because it's not all that confusing. I understand if there's different rooms and waiting areas. But I don't think that people will get that confused if their ticket is called and told to go to, the Medicaid window. I imagine that is
Sure. The DMV analogy is a good one.
I just happen to be there. And then are they informed of how long they can expect to wait when they arrive at an HRA center, clients?
So that information is not provided to clients in part because of just the way in which that information would be gathered. But it's something that, we continue to work on in terms of minimizing the wait times that our clients face. We recognize that there are times where individuals will reschedule work to come in to, resolve issues on their case. And so we want to make sure that clients are able to, be seen in an efficient manner.
And then do you have a sense of how the closing of HRA centers during the pandemic impacted wait times for those people that did come in?
I'd have to take a look at our wait times for the centers that remained open. So we can certainly get back to you. That information continues to be collected. I'll get back to you on that.
Okay, moving on to 1642, which is the requiring the Office of Operations to report on the exits from city administered facilities and the financing starts and completions of permanent housing for those exiting city administered facilities. Do agencies currently collect that data?
So I can't speak for other agencies. I think from an administration point of view, recognizing this report focuses on multiple agencies, we, from a top line point of view, want to be sure that the reporting requirements aren't duplicative of existing efforts and reporting, and making sure that we're aligning reporting metrics and timeframes. We think that that's important in terms of making sure, that there's, useful and comparable data. I think we, want to work with the council in terms of advancing this. I think having these additional metrics included in the reporting is just a matter of making sure that we get those things right.
That would be helpful. I mean, when we look at data in the NMR, it's sometimes difficult to glean what lessons we should be learning because some of the data is not necessarily as granular as we would need it to be. So, length of stay tells one story, but it does not get into, greater detail about why, and it doesn't tell
Absolutely.
us why, and frankly, I was out at Ward's Island a couple of weeks ago. I spoke to an individual who is sight impaired. He's been in that shelter for 4.5, 5 years, and that was just one person that I happened to meet. Actually it was his, the other men in the shelter directed me to talk to him because he really needs some help. And so, we want to understand for future administrations and future councils, why we're seeing somebody like that in shelter for almost 5 years, when he has the wherewithal to be at permanent housing. Do agencies coordinate on best practices related to exits from temporary shelters? In other words, is there some type of interagency council or other type of coordinating task force of any kind that between DSS and HPD or any other city agencies that may play a role in offering permanent housing?
Yeah, so we certainly work together at the agency level with our partners, with NYCHA, with HPD. We have regular convenings through the deputy mayor's team for the Interagency Council on Homelessness. That's a local law that requires quarterly meetings to share best practices, share information about the work that the respective agencies are doing. So those conversations
When is
are
the next meeting of that coordinating council?
I would
You know?
have to look. I believe the last one was in July, but I'd have to double check my calendar. That's something that we can easily follow up on.
I'd like to attend the next one if that's okay.
We'd be happy to get back to you.
Because but there's been a long-standing criticism of the fact that homelessness and social services are under one deputy mayor, and housing is under a different deputy mayor, and there is a lack of a lack of synergy, or a lack of understanding, a lack of communication between those two sides, and so that's something that I think is not new, and I think continues to be a real problem. I mean, for example, just this gentleman I've been talking to, I know that there are HPD set-aside units for people who are sight impaired. So how on earth is it there are not that many men in shelter who are sight impaired? So how is it possible that somebody could be sitting in shelter in Ward's Island for almost 5 years when we know that there are set-aside units for sight impaired people in the HPD pipeline? So I'm actually going to be emailing you his information later today. So.
Thank you. I was going to say, if you can email me that information. But yeah, I mean, we do coordinate across agencies and, regular communication. Are there opportunities of improvement? Sure. I know you mentioned the sort of having the housing agencies and homeless agencies reporting to one deputy mayor. I know there was a big conversation over the course of the last year. So we will see sort of what the future holds on that.
I am going to turn it over to any of my colleagues for questions. We've also been joined by Council Member Vanessa Gibson. Do any of my colleagues have questions?
And just a reminder, council members, if you would like to ask a question and you have not yet used the raise hand function in Zoom, you can do that now if you do want to ask any questions.
By all means, don't be shy. All right. Seeing none. So, okay, moving on. Intro 149, which would be in relation to updating the report on utilization of and applications for multi-agency emergency housing assistance. Is the administration generally in support of this legislation?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think, one kind of, just as a kind of 30,000 foot view right now is, we have obviously a very limited amount of time left in this term. And so if the administration is not in favor of a bill or has serious reservations on a bill, kind of like, please let us know now or forever hold your peace, because we're going to try to move forward pretty quickly on whatever legislation we can get passed between now and the end of the year.
Understood. And just as was stated in testimony, we certainly just want to make sure that it's not duplicative, and that it does reflect, from the position that I sit in, certainly reflects an accurate picture of clients in DSS, HRA, DHS systems, as opposed to our sister agencies. Got it.
Okay, so moving on to Intro 1794, which is sponsored by Councilmember Lika Ampry Samuel. What's the administration's position on this bill at this point? Big picture.
Yeah, big picture. So we certainly support the intent of the legislation. I mentioned that the agency does provide training to the 17,000 anti-bias, or excuse me, 17,000 DSS, HRA, and DHS employees. This is the anti-bias and trauma-informed service provision training. And the goal of that is certainly to improve staff professionalism and their response during challenging circumstances, during client interactions, interactions with their colleagues. We do want to be sure that we are sensitive in terms of shifting unfunded mandates to our contracted provider. The legislation as written would extend training requirements beyond just DHS employees to our contracted providers. So that's something that we're very thoughtful about in terms of making sure that that's implemented in a way that it's not an unfunded mandate.
Can you explain to me how is the administration, what is the trauma informed services look like in terms of the training for DSS employees?
So this was training that was announced as part of our response to this was in response to the client experience package of bills and the agency's response to Ms. Headley and her experience at one of the HRA job centers. And we worked to have a training developed. It was, there was a slowdown because of COVID. That training was then moved online. And so we continue to implement that for all 17,000 DSS, HRA, and DHS employees.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know a little bit like more granularly. One of the nonprofit providers that we work with in the council as part of our New York City Families and Children in New York City Homeless System initiative. So we have an initiative out of the council that we fund working with Wynn and Henry Street, Project Hospitality, Canva, and Bronxworks, and HSU. And Wynn uses their allocation. They each use it for different things. Wynn uses their allocation for trauma-informed care for all employees, including security and really every custodial staff, and everybody receives trauma-informed care training. And so I'd be interested to know, and I encourage you guys to reach out to them to see how, what is the protocol that they use, who is the trainer, what is the curriculum, because I would want to make sure that that type of training, that they've had some experience now for probably 6 years now, so it'd be worth looking at what they've been doing.
Sure, we can certainly follow up, and I know that we're aware of different providers and a variety of training obligations that they have for their staff and for contracted security. So we'd be happy to continue those conversations.
And this is something that they did on their own. So at the moment, contracted providers are not required to do that type of training. De-escalation, trauma-informed care.
Right, there are elements of training, but I think what's required under this is a more comprehensive training requirement.
Okay. So currently, so the efforts that that DSS is doing right now, it's not fully rolled out yet. Is that right?
The training of the 17,000 employees.
Yeah.
No, that's not complete at this time.
And this will be for all staff, including supervisors.
That's correct.
All agency security staff.
Yes.
All agency staff. And private security staff that works in city run centers or city run facilities.
I will have to go back. I believe that the legislation that was passed does include contracted security, and those trainings are being rolled out. And that's the HRA contracted security. That's the HRA security.
Yeah. I think in kind of further conversations over the next couple of weeks, like it would be helpful to know specifically how many, you know, how many trainings have happened and where, and kind of what the timeline is. And I'll speak with Council Member Humphrey Samuel as well, and
Okay.
we'll coordinate.
Great. Thank you.
And then finally, the intro 2081, Councilmember Moya's bill. So how is DSS changed its implementation of one-shots during COVID? Has it changed it? And maybe if you could speak a little bit to that. And also just kind of on a bigger picture is, you know, how are one-shots working within the context of ERAP?
Sure. So we continue our efforts. As I mentioned in testimony, under this administration, we've made a significant investment in terms of doubling the annual expenditure for rent arrears payments since 2013. That both speaks to the number of clients reached with that, as well as the total payment, reflecting the increased cost of rent and utility payments over time. We do this outreach through a number of channels. We do have a flyer online that's been posted. We conduct regular outreach through our outreach and advocacy unit, through my team going out and partnering with elected officials who ask us to participate in tabling events, town hall forums. I have stated that, you know, almost every town hall forum on HRA does include questions about one-shot deals. It's something that we recognize clients do have questions about. The flyer that's posted on our website is very clear and helpful in terms of providing information about the program and how to go about applying and what that covers, as well as things that HRA considers while reviewing an application. In regards to what we've been doing with one-shot deals as it relates to the ERAP program, as per state guidance, New Yorkers must first apply for ERAP if they're in need in emergency rental assistance. If their application is denied, they then may apply for a one-shot deal. And so based off of that state requirement, we've adjusted our work in terms of reviewing and looking at those one-shot deal applications. The ERAP program is moving forward. Determinations are being made on ERAP applications. Clients need to show that determination information, so that way if they have been denied for the ERAP program, we're able to move forward their one-shot deal application.
And can you talk a little bit about the administration's outreach on one-shots, and you know, if somebody's having trouble with technology, is that are there options or a certain level of outreach that the administration is doing?
Yeah, so our outreach sort of runs the gamut. As I mentioned, we have a flyer that's available on HRA's website that includes information about one-shot deals. We participate in town halls. Obviously, over the course of the past 18 months, most of them have been remote, although we have gone to different tabling events that are outdoors to provide information about all HRA programs, including one-shot deals. We also include information about both the ERAP program and one-shot deals and changes that have been made to Access HRA in terms of what technological changes we've made to that application to be able to accept one-shot deal applications using Access HRA. So there's been a range of outreach that's taken place both over the course of the pandemic, but before as well, recognizing the importance of payment of rent and utility arrears as a means of keeping people in their home.
So I'm sorry, so you can apply for a one shot through Access HRA?
Correct.
Okay. Okay, those are all my questions. I'm happy to turn it over to, we've been also joined by Councilmember Lander as well. If any of my colleagues have questions for the administration, please let me know. Raise your hand, and I'll have the opportunity to do that right now. If not, we will let the Deputy Commissioner go. Okay. With that, I want to express my appreciation. Thank you very much, Commissioner, and we'll look forward to hearing from the public now, and we'll be following up with you in the coming weeks to discuss moving these bills forward. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Take care. And representatives from my team will stay on.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Levin, and thank you to Deputy Commissioner Drinkwater. We have concluded the Department of Social Services testimony for today, and we are now going to turn to public testimony. First, I'd like to remind everyone that I will be calling individuals up in panels. Again, want to remind you all that if you're not planning on testifying, we are requesting that you please watch the live stream on our website, since I'm going to be calling everyone who was logged in to testify. Once your name is called, a member of our staff will unmute you, and you may begin your testimony once the Sergeant at Arms sets the clock and gives you the cue. All testimony will be limited to 3 minutes. Remember that there is a few seconds of a delay when you are unmuted before we can hear you. Please wait for the Sergeant at Arms to announce that you may begin before starting your testimony. And the first panel of public testimony in order of speaking will be Josefa Silva, Eric Lee, and Gabriela Sandoval Requena. I will now call on Josefa Silva.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon, Chair Levin and members of the committee. My name is Josefa Silva. I'm the Director of Policy and Advocacy at WIN. I'm here today to express our support and speak about Intro 1794, the bill requiring training in trauma-informed care, de-escalation, and professionalism for DHS and contractor staff. I'd like to begin by thanking Councilmember Ampry Samuel for introducing this bill. It recognizes that DHS needs to improve how it interacts with and treats the New Yorkers who look to the agency for services. We've been particularly troubled by the experiences that the families in our shelters have had when interacting with DHS staff, beginning at PATH, the intake center for families with children seeking shelter. What they've described is unacceptable, and Intro 1794 can help change that. The bill can help ensure that families have support in healing from trauma and are not re-traumatized at intake or in shelter. At WIN, we know that it takes special knowledge and skills to truly support families who are in the midst of the terrible experience of homelessness and who are dealing with the circumstances and experiences that have led up to it. That's why we launched an in-house training and professional initiative many years ago, which Chair Levin has already spoken to a bit. This initiative equips our staff of over 500 with the knowledge, skills, and supports that they need to provide trauma-informed care to the approximately 2,000 families that we serve each year across our shelters and permanent supportive housing. From this initiative, we've seen a real evolution in the quality of client-staff interactions and in clients' experiences with us. Just as importantly, we've seen a shift in the entire approach to clients and services, a shift that supports families in healing and in building a brighter future. These efforts have been possible thanks to funding from the City Council initiative, Children and Families in New York City Shelter. Thank you, Chair Levin, for establishing and leading that initiative and making that possible. This initiative has taught us many important lessons in what makes training effective. We hope to have the opportunity to bring these lessons to bear in the trainings that DSS has begun offering, as well as with Intro 1794. We have learned that training needs to be reinforced and there needs to be hands-on coaching and support. So we recommend that this bill and any training being provided happen more than once a year, and that it happen in an ongoing way with professional development opportunities that support implementation. We also asked that 1794 require DHS to provide nonprofit contractors with the resources they'll need to provide quality training for their staff. In recognition of the problem with an unfunded mandate that was mentioned earlier in the discussion, we believe that DHS should be at the forefront of supporting trauma-informed care and of providing the resources, which may include technical assistance and others.
You could go ahead and finish.
I'm just going to thank you for your time and for your attention today, and thank you for this bill and helping protect families and New Yorkers experiencing homelessness from trauma.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Josefa. Now I'm going to call on Eric Lee for testimony.
Time starts now.
Hi, good morning. My name is Eric Lee, and I'm the Director of Policy and Planning at Homeless Services United. Thank you, Chair Levin and members of the General Welfare Committee for allowing me to testify today. I will summarize my written testimony for time. The package of bills being considered could help to more accurately measure the breadth of homelessness in New York City and how families and individuals access services and shelter. For intros 149 and 1642, we appreciate the Council's commitment to improving reporting both around shelter utilization and placement outcomes, as well as exits from shelter. Providers and advocates would like to see additional transparency around the data for both. Our top line recommendation is that both bills should seek to implement the same tracking and reporting requirements for all city agencies that are serving families and individuals experiencing homelessness. Currently, both bills have slightly different requirements, which could make implementation challenging for local law. It's been a long-held frustration that current reporting requirements do not allow for a full picture of how many people in New York City are currently in each shelter system on any given night or over the course of a month. The inability to count across systems has stymied the efforts to accurately measure the scope of the crisis of homelessness, as well as how well each system supports access to permanent housing and how equitably resources are or are not shared across the systems. For Local Law 37 reporting, a uniform tracking methodology should be utilized across DHS, DYCD, HPD, and HRA, which holistically includes head counts at all facilities where clients stay overnight, not just traditional shelters. HSU recommends 3 reporting figures specifically be tracked across agencies and programs. That would be actual daily overnight census, the average daily overnight census, and total monthly unduplicated numbers of families and individuals. Furthermore, we specifically want to point out that DYCD administered facilities should specifically be included, not excluded, in average and daily overnight censuses and unduplicated numbers. For 1642, we also have recommendations for improving the exits from shelter report, including creating a new section just for Section 8 that disaggregates by NYCHA, HPD, and HCR, and further disaggregating by project and tenant-based vouchers. Creating a new category for people not medically appropriate for shelter, disaggregated by hospitals, medical rehab, medical respites, and long-term care. Create a new category for individuals utilizing a subsidy for either a private room or unsubsidized SRO that isn't supportive housing, and further defining made your own arrangements category. For 1794, we want to echo Josefa's thanks to Chair Levin and members of the council for your support of the Children and Families Initiative.
Time expired.
You go ahead and finish, Eric. That's okay.
Thank you, Chair Levin. So HSU has long supported and promoted the use of trauma-informed care and de-escalation techniques. We recommend that the bill 1794 should allow contracted providers the flexibility to train either internally or externally, and ensure that equivalent trainings currently being held count towards meeting this new requirement, and ensuring that there's sufficient funding given for DHS budget modifications in case shelter budgets may not have enough to accommodate for 2 additional trainings for all additional staff. And then for 2081, for improving one-shots, we support the creation of new locations in community to assist with applying for one-shots. We also think that it would be helpful if HRA could accommodate on-demand phone applications for special circumstances where people have difficulty with paper applications, or there's extremely urgent emergencies where a paper application would not be possible. HRA denial notices should also include additional information if they're citing lack of client response, including date and time of the calls made to clients as well as the number called, so that they can verify that they did receive those calls. And for the one-shot reports, we have a few recommendations in terms of the number of applications should be listed that did not result in a one-shot disaggregated by the reason for the denial. One-shot recipients should be further broken down by the number and percentage that resulted in a one-shot as a result of a fair hearing and the reason for the overturned denial, and a report and percentage of recipients that received a one-shot that applied multiple times, whether 2, 3, 4+ times before they actually got an approval. And then just making sure that this reporting for one-shots is disaggregated to protect client confidentiality by aggregating it by zip code rather than the actual location of the client. Thank you for the opportunity for testifying today.
Thank you so much, Eric.
Thanks for your testimony, Eric. I will now call on Gabriela Sandoval Requena.
Time starts now.
Good afternoon, Chair Levin and members of the General Welfare Committee. Thank you for your leadership and for the opportunity to provide testimony on behalf of New Destiny. My name is Gabriela Sandoval Requena, and I am the Senior Policy Analyst of New Destiny Housing. Our mission is to end the cycle of abuse and homelessness for domestic violence survivors. And we do this by developing supportive housing for homeless DV survivors, assisting survivors who are fleeing DV to obtain subsidies and find apartments, and by advocating for more housing resources for survivors. First of all, I'd like to express our gratitude to Councilmember Levin and the committee members for their demonstrated commitment to help improve the lives of New York City's most vulnerable by introducing these 5 bills today. We are submitting written testimony, so I'd like to use this time to share with you our takeaways on 2 of the proposed bills. Particularly, we commend the Council for Intro 1642, which would require the Mayor's Office of Operations to report on exits from all city shelter systems. This bill would create a transparent, centralized mechanism that tracks shelter exits and bring the city one step closer to implementing a system that allows for interagency collaboration and to meet the federal mandates for coordinated entry. This reporting will also provide information about service gaps to improve strategies and identify the need for additional resources. New Destiny supports Intro 1642. We are grateful to Councilmember Levin's leadership and your staff for Intro 149 and support its goal to increase transparency and accountability to all city shelter systems by centralizing shelter census data. It is long overdue for the city to create one combined census that shows the true scope of homelessness in New York City. We simply cannot solve a problem that we failed to measure correctly. Currently, the Administration City Code Local Law 37 of 2011 requires city agencies that provide temporary housing to produce monthly reports on emergency housing assistance utilization. Yet this reporting lacks uniformity, specifically in their methodology. Some agencies report unique individuals and others a nightly average. And this inconsistency makes it impossible to combine the various reports into one census count of all New Yorkers experiencing homelessness. Furthermore, these reports are only released on the monthly basis, with the only city agency that currently provides daily shelter census being the Department of Homeless Services, and far less data available for the thousands of families and individuals in the city's other shelter systems, including HRA domestic violence shelters. This discrepancy in data hides from view some of the city's most vulnerable people, including domestic violence survivors, people living in the streets, homeless youth, homeless individuals living with HIV/AIDS, and those in HPD shelter system. This results in budget and policy decisions focused on those that are in public view and with less attention and accountability for those that are not. New Destiny respectfully suggests that the Council considers the following recommendations for Intro 149, if I may proceed.
Sure, of course, yes.
Thank you. require a combined daily census that counts, that adds all New Yorkers experiencing homelessness. Second, to mandate a consistent methodology of all city agencies to report shelter census, and ensure that the definition of H-rate domestic violence shelter includes both emergency beds and DV Tier 2 shelters. And lastly, but not least, track and report the same outcomes in the mayor's management report. We thank the council for the opportunity to testify and welcome the opportunity to for further collaboration. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Gabriella. Thank you. And we'll be following up and seeing what we can get done before the end of the year. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to, sorry, before we proceed, I just want to acknowledge Councilmember Rafael Salamanca has joined us as well.
Thank you to this entire panel for your testimony. Now I'm going to call on our next few panelists. Our next panelists will be in this order of speaking: Deborah Berkman, Tawaki Komatsu, and Craig Hughes. I will now turn to Deborah Berkman.
Time starts now.
Thank you. Chair Levin, council members and staff, good afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak here to the Committee on General Welfare. My name is Deborah Berkman, and I'm a coordinating attorney in the Public Benefits Unit and the Shelter Advocacy Initiative at the New York Legal Assistance Group, or NYLAG. The Shelter Advocacy Initiative at NYLAG provides legal services and advocacy to people experiencing homelessness, including helping them with their public benefits. The proposed local laws introduced today would dramatically have a positive effect on my clients' lives, and NYLAG wholeheartedly supports them. We are submitting written testimony, so today I would like to focus my oral testimony on Intro 1794, which, although is a necessary step, does not go far enough. The city also must create an effective oversight mechanism to investigate complaints about staff and to enforce compliance with conduct policies. Unfortunately, my clients routinely report negative experiences with staff at intake centers and at shelters. Many of my clients have suffered from extreme physical or emotional trauma and discrimination, and the experience of homelessness itself can be deeply traumatic. Shelters and intake centers are strongly policed, either by DHS police themselves or by private security providers. Overwhelmingly, clients report that their interactions with shelter and intake staff are either emotionally or physically aggressive. I have many clients who are forced into street homelessness because interactions with shelter staff are so stressful. Clients report that staff, particularly at intake centers, are rude and aggressive, and at worst can be physically threatening. And as this council is no doubt aware, clients can spend upward of 24 hours at the intake centers. Many of my clients experience street homelessness because although they are willing to go inside, they cannot make it through the intake process itself. I recall one client who had been experiencing street homelessness and wanted to apply for shelter. He suffered from debilitating anxiety and was treated particularly poorly by the staff at the 30th Street Intake Center for single adult men. DHS was well aware of his condition as he had been granted a reasonable accommodation based on it. Nonetheless, he was at the intake site for over 24 hours and only fed once during this time. He was told that if he left for any amount of time, he'd have to start the process again. The client then had a major panic attack while waiting, and staff would not allow him to use any of his mitigating strategies. Despite the fact that his requested accommodation had been approved as medically necessary, staff had no knowledge of it and refused to look into its own system for it. He reports that he was mocked and yelled at repeatedly. The client was not able to speak about the experience without crying. I have another set of clients who had a violent encounter at the Adult Family Intake Center, or AFIC. This couple had been discovered sleeping outside scaffolding by a DHS contracted outreach team, and one of the outreach workers escorted the couple to AFIC for shelter intake. Both individuals lived with mental illness, but were willing to try sleeping inside. While at AFIC, one of the members of the couple experienced extreme anxiety and PTSD and reacted by raising their voice. In response, DHS police rushed over, surrounded them, and would not allow the outreach worker to help de-escalate the situation. The client kept yelling. I'm sorry.
You could go ahead and finish, Deborah.
Thank you. The client kept yelling, at which point a DHS police officer punched both members of the couple in the face, resulting in the other member of the couple losing consciousness. Throughout the incident, the outreach worker tried to de-escalate the situation, but was told repeatedly by DHS police that he needed to walk away and wasn't allowed to help. Unsurprisingly, the couple returned to street homelessness. While intro number 1794 is a very important step in the right direction and one that we wholeheartedly support, We also recommend that workers be trained in the needs of clients with mental illness and that DHS maintain a robust complaint system where reports of abuses are recorded, investigated, and if warranted, penalties are imposed for bad actors. We thank the Committee on General Welfare for the work it has done to facilitate services for vulnerable New Yorkers and for taking this opportunity to continue to improve the conditions for our clients.
Thank you so much, Deborah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Deborah. I'll now call on Tawaki Kamatsu for testimony.
Time starts now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
we can
we
hear you.
Mr. Levin, in 2017 in October, you had a public town hall meeting in Brooklyn. As you're approaching the entrance to that school at St. Francis, I told you that I was being illegally prevented from attending that town hall meeting. Mr. Banks was among the people that conducted that meeting with you. On February 1st of this year, I got discovery material in federal litigation confirming that he actually sparked the incidents in April of 2017 that caused me to be blocked from attending those public town hall meetings. My first time I testified to you was on April 20th of 2017. I told you I had litigation against HRA assigned to OTDA. I got information from OTDA, specifically Nigel Marks, on August 27th of this year, stating with regards to fair hearings that if I request discovery material from HRA, OTDA is condoning the fact that HRA will not provide me that discovery material. So with regards to what Ms. Drinkwater stated today about town hall meetings, there was a public resource fair meeting on August 24th of this year in Staten Island. I talked to Mr. Banks yet again. He lied to my face yet again. I previously talked to you about FOIL requests. You said that you would do something to try to help me get FOIL requests. You lied to my face then. The conversation I had with Mr. Banks on August 24th of this year. Can you hear that? One sec. I'll summarize it for you. So basically what Ms. Banks said to me at the end of our conversation is, please turn my audio recording off and step away from the table in that public resource fair meeting. So the point is, if it's a public meeting, if it's a public forum, I'm conducting myself lawfully. Why is it that the commissioner of DSS is violating my First Amendment and 14th Amendment rights, as well as New York City Charter 1116, while you as a chairman of the General Welfare Committee have known about this and have done nothing about it? I also met with DOI. I talked to New York State Attorney General Letitia James about that. So bottom line is, I filed an order to show cause application on Monday of this week in the New York State Supreme Court litigation I had against HRA in 2017. HRA actually violated the sealing order that New York State Supreme Court Judge Barry Oshiger issued on January 17th of 2017. Jessica Ramos violated it, so did Jacqueline Rothenberg. I've got the emails through discovery. So Ms. Berkman, Deborah Berkman, can we have a conversation after this meeting such that your organization will agree to provide me pro bono legal representation to have a subpoena issued against HRA? I would certainly love that. I talked to legal aid last Friday. They told me there's nothing they can do. Problem is they're getting funding from HRA, so there's a conflict of interest. I'm hoping that your organization won't have that conflict because, like I said, more people than just me do fair hearings with the OTDA. They ask for discovery material. So if Nigel Marks is telling everybody else, you know what, sorry, but we're going to condone the fact that HRA is illegally not providing you the discovery material that you need to prevail with your fair hearings. What can you do about that, Mr. Levin? Oh, by the way, the building that I live in, still not registered with HPD. I've told you previously, it's run by Urban Pathways. HRA just gave them another $14 million contract. I talked to Mr. Banks about that too on August 24th. He told me that if what I was telling him then was false, he wouldn't be able to register that new contract with the controller's office. Check HPD's website. Take a look at 802 Fairmount Place in the Bronx. See for yourself whether it's currently registered with HPD. It's a fair request.
802 Fairmount.
That's the end of my testimony. Fairmount, Fairmount Place. I talked to Vito Muscacciolo back then too. He told me that HPD would do something about it. The person directly below my apartment still doesn't have hot water for the last 6 months. and yet HRA is giving them a $14 million new contract. How do you reconcile that?
I have it up. I'll look it up right now. But I don't have the information.
Too, I previously testified to you. Right. I testified to you also on February, I think 9th of 2019 about a disabled military veteran who suffered 6 strokes. He passed away in this building on August 10th of 2020 because HRA deprived him of an air conditioner during a very hot and humid summer. So if someone has 6 strokes and this building is very humid, why in the heck was he not provided an air conditioner when I emailed Mr. Banks more than a week prior to his death if HRA could, arrange for him to be provided that AC? I mean, think about it. If your father, if your child needed some reasonable accommodation that wasn't provided to them, and then you came home, found out that your child was no longer, among the living, you would seriously have a major problem with that. Mm-hmm. And yet you're not doing anything against HRA about this that I've told you about repeatedly since 2017. Again, that's the end of my testimony. Go forward with the next person.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cox.
Thank you, Tabaki, for your testimony. I am now going to call on Craig Hughes for testimony.
Time starts now.
Thanks, Chair Levin and the committee for holding the hearing today. We're submitting written testimony, so I will do a summary, but I would be remiss in a discussion of trauma-informed care with the city to not note that in my about 15 years of working in social services in New York City, I have not seen anything that quite parallels the sort of mass production of trauma that DHS has overseen and the mayor hasn't required in the mass transfers back to congregate shelters. I have never received the sheer number of phone calls crying, the fears, the terror, and our office has been inundated by quite literally hundreds of cases like this. We now know from records that came out in a Freedom of Information request that the city, in fact, did not have health guidance to do the transfers back. The level of trauma that's been produced is palpable and was not matched during Bloomberg, to be blunt. With that said, I will just make a few notes about, particularly in regards to Intro 149. It's really important to hold why the numbers matter so much. People sometimes say that the homeless count numbers just don't matter. They matter in large part because of the resources. In New York City, we have a vast inequity in how homeless service bureaucracies get access to resources. So under de Blasio, the City FEPS voucher program, for example, DYCD has been able to get almost no subsidies. HPD has 0. So if your home burns down, you have no way out of an HPD shelter. There are no City FEPS resources. And the reason that we would argue that this is happening is because the definition of what are sometimes called municipal shelters or city shelters is really reduced to include only DHS shelters. But there are actually 5 municipal shelter systems and 4 that are administered by 4 city agencies. And if we don't have a full tally or an honest accounting of those 5 municipal shelter systems, then we end up in a situation where some people get access to resources by one bureaucracy, by entering into a shelter system in one bureaucracy, but not in another. And that's just a terrible way to do homeless policy. The most problematic of the reports isn't addressed by Intro 149, and we think it should be, and that is the DHS Daily Census Report. The DHS Daily Census Report is the report that the press goes to. It's the report the city uses when it comes to homeless people. And the DHS Daily Census Report is, I know my time is up.
That's okay. No.
Okay.
Go ahead and finish.
The DHS Daily Census Report is probably the most important counting document, and it is deeply misleading. In particular, I don't have the document on the screen, obviously, but there's a total shelter census box or total individuals in shelter in that document. And that leaves out everyone that's in a drop-in or in a stabilization bed or in a safe haven or in application processes of PATH or AFIC and that sort of thing. And so what you end up with is a DHS shelter census document that the press looks at, that politicians look at, that policy people look at, and it actually systematically downplays. In 2010, Councilmember Palma, then Councilmember Palma, got then Commissioner Hess to say that, yeah, he knew stabilization beds, for example, weren't even mentioned on that report, and he would try to fix it. 11 years later, nothing has been done. And it's because the city is nervous of what happens when you create a document that everyone looks at that actually includes a higher but accurate number of homeless people. With that said, we do hope that there would be a consideration before you leave, Councilmember Levin, to mandate an accurate DHS daily census report, because that's the most important document that we can get in terms of the DHS numbers. With that said, Local Law 37's report is the most important current document. And that document should be the document that everyone turns to. But unfortunately, because of how the city compiles and presents and reports the data, it's very, very hard to figure out what it actually means much of the time. And so there's a few specific things that can be done. And I'm going to echo some of what my colleagues have said here. First, for the cover page, the reporting should include two major things. One, a point in time count for every single system. So what is on, let's say, the last day of the month, what the number of people in every shelter bed or every chair or every overnight setting, what's that count across the 5 systems? And then an average census across the 5 systems. And so you'd get a shot at exactly what it looks like on one day and what it looks like over the course of a month. Secondly, there needs to be accurate methodology across and uniform methodology across the systems. Right now, for example, DYCD uses a methodology that only includes new entrants into its system. So all the people that were there the day before the month started aren't included. So there needs to be uniformity across the system, across the methodologies, so that you can actually get a count that can be honestly assessed by people looking at it. And we also need to make sure that, when DHS does the reporting in its Local Law 37 report, what it does is that it kind of parses out between facility, what it calls a facility, and what I'll call, a bed or a shelter. And it's a way of making the document far less transparent than it needs to be. So DHS should be held to reporting the exact number of people in church beds, the exact number of people in drop-ins, and so on, and then tallying that up so you can get a full number. Right now, the agency just doesn't do it, obviously for political reasons. Finally, and I'll stop after this, that we have we have an opportunity at the end of this administration to make sure the next administration doesn't fail where this one did. And one of the places this administration has failed so badly is in the area of homeless policy. It has been a true historic disaster. And the way out of that includes being honest about how many people have no home and come to the city's doorstep. And if we don't create an accurate number, it's not the next administration that's going to do it, because they're going to say the exact same thing Commissioner Banks said when he testified here months ago, which is you'd have to go back in history and revise everything. You don't. You can start now, and then we can start with an honest assessment of what the count is to divide resources appropriately. Thank you. Sorry for taking so long.
Thank you, Craig. Is there any other members of the public that would like to testify?
Just echoing Chair Levin, if anyone has inadvertently been missed who is logged in right now and wants to testify, you can use the Zoom raise hand function, and I'll call on you in the order your hand is raised.
Okay, going once, going twice. Okay, I want to thank everybody for your time this afternoon. I look forward to working on incorporating your recommendations to the legislation and hopefully moving forward on these bills in the coming weeks. And I want to thank everybody once again and have a great day.
Chair Levin,
This hearing is adjourned. Oh,
you
yes, sorry.
I just want to note that written testimony will be reviewed in full by committee staff, and you can submit that up to the record up to 72 hours after the close of this hearing by emailing it to testimony@council.nyc.gov. Now I'll turn it back over to Chair Levin.
Thank you very much. And I want to thank committee staff and the sergeants at arms for conducting the hearing today. And with that, at 1:31 p.m., this hearing is adjourned. Thank you.